This is Sarah Stewart Holland.
This is Beth Silvers.
You're listening to Pantsuit Politics, where we take a different approach to the news. We're delighted to be joined today by Representative Morgan McGarvey from Kentucky's 3rd District. He serves on the Budget Committee. We had lots of questions about that. He's out there thinking about the midterms. We had thoughts on that as well. We had a great conversation with him, and you definitely want to stick around for Outside of Politics because Representative McGarvey has a very unique life experience you're going to want to hear about at the close of the show.
Before we share that conversation, we do want to remind you, with Mother's Day fast approaching, that if your mom has attended, a political protest in the past year, or if she reads the New York Times every morning, or if she listens to podcasts, we have a gift guide that will be perfect for you. Check out our exclusive 10th anniversary merchandise, a video pep talk, tickets to our birthday celebration event, gifts as passionate and engaged as your mom is. Find the perfect way to celebrate your mom and get her a treat to get her through in our show notes.
As you know, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. We're also celebrating 1,000 episodes at the start of June. It is incredible to think it's been that long and that many shows. We'd love to include your voice in our celebrations. We're collecting listener stories, memories, birthday wishes to feature in special series of episodes this summer. Please check out the links in the show note if you're interested in contributing. Next up, Representative Morgan McGarvey. Congressman, welcome to Pantsuit Politics.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, listen, we like to kick it off with softballs. What's going on with the budget and government funding? Are Democrats going to shut down the government? Thoughts?
Among us Kentuckians.
Yeah, just like, let's just start. Just put it on the tee and let you hit it.
Easy.
Right, yeah. So I'm on the Budget Committee this year, which has been really interesting. It's really fascinating stuff. And
is that a kind interpretation? Interesting, fascinating?
Well, the Trump budget is a total disaster, and it's been a train wreck. But the learning about the budget process has been really, I learned this when I was in the state legislature. So I was there for 10 years. And in my second year, I got on appropriations and revenue. It's like when you start to figure out how the budget works, that's when you really start to figure out how the rest of government works.
Right.
Particularly in the legislative branch when, yes, we do a lot of stuff. We make a lot of laws. There's a lot of great work that goes on. At the end of the day, we spend money.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the legislature does. We control spending, we control taxation, we control those things. So, what's going on with the budget right now? Let's look back, then look forward. They put forward this process called reconciliation, which just by saying the word probably bores a lot of people. But it's just the process, just like reconciling your checkbook. If you're like, oh, okay, here's how much is in my checkbook, here's how much I have to spend. All reconciliation does is it sets the rules for what will be in the budget. But the reason to do reconciliation is once you set those rules and they're there, not only can they not be broken, they can't be filibustered. So this makes this budget that's coming up filibuster proof, which makes all the work that's now going into the budget that much more important.
Right.
So, now we talk about what's in the budget because they've already told us. So like one of the disastrous things, and since there's a bunch of Kentucky people on this particular podcast right now, I'll talk a little bit about Kentucky, but it's the same all across the country, is the cuts to Medicaid.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans for a while had been saying, oh, we're not going to cut Medicaid and Medicare. But now they're actually going to have to put the numbers to the budget. And if you look at the reconciliation bill, which again tells you what's going to be there, it says there has to be at least $880 billion in cuts from the Energy and Commerce Committee. Okay, well, what does the Energy and Commerce Committee oversee? Energy, commerce, Medicaid, and Medicare. And here's just the math of it. Like, we can argue about whether it's a good or a bad thing to cut these programs. But if you take Medicaid and Medicare out of their budget, push it over to the side, they only oversee about $500 billion in spending. They have to have $880 billion in cuts. If you don't include Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah, that math doesn't math.
It doesn't math. And I went to law school, so I wouldn't have to do math. And it's
Same.
pretty easy to say that $500 billion is less than $880 billion. And so if they zero out the entirety of the rest of the spending they oversee, which they're not going to do.
I was thinking it seems unlikely.
Right, they're not going to zero it out. Then then they would still have to cut over $300 billion from Medicare or Medicaid. Now, where does that take us? They have said every time they possibly can, we're not going to cut Medicare, we're not going to cut Medicare, we're not going to cut Medicare. All right. When asked about Medicaid, they're always more squishy on it. If they actually don't cut Medicare, then the cuts are going to have to come from Medicaid. And for a state like Kentucky, it is just devastating. Nearly 30% of Louisvillians use Medicaid as healthcare.
Wow.
46% of Kentucky's kids are on Medicaid. We have areas in the state where 50% of people in Kentucky use Medicaid to get their health care. I was in the state legislature. The entirety of the Kentucky state budget, so everything you spend in a year, the state government in Kentucky, is less than the amount of money we get in federal Medicaid dollars.
Wow.
So you put forward, a 5% cut on Medicaid. Where does a state like Kentucky get that money to provide healthcare to kids, to seniors, to students, to people with disabilities? There's a lot of talk about all this going on right now, and we're not looking at behind these cuts. It's people, it's families. And you don't think about it like, oh, what student needs Medicaid? I had a room full of students where I'm sitting right now in my office. I had a room full of students from Kentucky, and they're all studying to be CRNAs, which is certified registered nurse anesthetists, right? So they're specialized nursing. Well, nearly everybody who does that, they have to already be a nurse. They have to have practical experience before they study for that. And then they can't work while they're in this 3-year intensive nursing program to do this. So one of the things that the students were telling me, and I wasn't expecting, is they're too old to be on their parents' health insurance. They're not working. They're studying to be nurses, which we're short nurse anesthetists in Kentucky. We already have a shortage of care providers. They get their health care through Medicaid while they're in school.
Wow.
That is just one example of people who are going to be impacted by this. Not to mention, I was on the phone with a mom today who's got a 25-year-old son home. He's had 4 open heart surgeries. He had a brain bleed his first week after he was born. He's had so many medical complications. He cannot go anywhere else. He cannot live anywhere else. His parents are still working around the clock to help him and could not do it despite their care, their jobs, their love, without the Medicaid dollars that pay for some of his care. It ranges the entire spectrum of people who would possibly be impacted by this, and a significant human cost.
Yeah.
Congressman, while we're checking in on the numbers, do you not see $800 billion in fraud in the Medicaid program? That's how I've heard they're going to make this work.
Right. That's the thing. Like, get rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse. Get rid of it. Nobody wants there to be waste, fraud, and abuse in government, because those are dollars that can be used to help people out. But look at Medicaid. Again, I dealt with this on the state level. There are so many people overseeing Medicaid that there isn't $880 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. If there's $880 billion in fraud, we would know that, right? Yeah. you would know that. There are not 880 billionaires living in the United States. And this is a massive amount of money. And even now you're seeing the Republicans say, we know that. Just this week, you saw Don Bacon, who's from a more moderate district. It's a district that Kamala Harris won in 2024 in Nebraska. And he said, okay, I'm not going to take anything over $500 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Well, in that statement, of course, it's implied, if not explicitly stated, there's going to be cuts to Medicaid. Why $500 billion? Where are you going to take that? Who's going to be harmed?
Yeah, how are they going to make it work? Are they going to just tell the states this is what you're not getting, and the states figure out who to cut? Are they going to put? I know I've heard discussions of work requirements, but how's that going to lead to kicking people off the rolls?
And I'm hearing rumors of how they're going to do it, right? You're hearing rumors from here, from other members, from people around here. One would be to put some caps on. One would be to reduce the match. Again, now we're starting to talk like boring policy stuff, but
it matters.
It matters because, like in Kentucky, there's a 70-30 match on Medicaid. The federal government pays 70%, Kentucky pays 30%. Then there's a 90-10 match on the Affordable Care Act population, the expansion population, people who are now covered by by the expansion of Medicaid. If you reduce that match, right, again, the states have to make up that money. In a state like Kentucky, where the budget is already cash strapped, where state legislatures cannot borrow money, where do you get that money?
Right.
Or do you? Do you get that? So a state legislature is going to have to come in. Do they have to cut Medicaid? No, I guess technically they don't, but they're going to be cutting from your roads, from your bridges, from your infrastructure, from your schools, from wherever else to
Oh,
even
and
get
by the
that
way,
money
they
to put
have
in
to start
Medicaid.
doing their disaster management too. Like they're piling all
Right.
kinds of stuff on the
They're
states.
piling all sorts of things on there. And then, or they are going to cut Medicaid as well as probably cutting some of the other services. So it's a really sort of nasty budget that they have put together because they're talking about taking away healthcare from people. They're talking about taking food away from our kids, from our seniors, from our veterans. We have a lot of veterans who, unfortunately, are in a position where they're relying on Medicaid for mental health trauma, or they're relying on SNAP for food. And so that's what's in this budget. It is really a cruel budget. And then I think you have to look at, why are they doing it? So why are they doing it? Well, the answer is right there in the bill text, and it's right there in the way everybody's talking about it. They are making these cuts to veterans, to seniors, to kids, to basic needs in healthcare, so that they can pay for the largest tax giveaway to Donald Trump's billionaire buddies in the history of America. This is a tax cut that is going to take vital, basic services away from kids, veterans, seniors, to line the pockets of the absolute wealthiest billionaires in the country. And in doing so, they're also going to add over $2 trillion to the nation's debt. I've said, I don't ever want to hear a Republican talk to me about the debt again if they vote for this budget.
Well, that's my question. Where are the sort of Freedom Caucus? I mean, I know Kentucky's been front and center in a lot of this because of Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, who at least stick by their guns on some of this stuff. Where are the people who are concerned about the deficit, Chip Roy's and all them? Where are they at?
Boy, they sure claim to be concerned about the debt and the deficit until Donald Trump tells them not to be. And, I thought they worked for the American people, not for Donald Trump. And you got to give Massey a little bit of credit, right? I mean, you don't have to believe me. Look at Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie says that this bill is going to add trillions of dollars to the nation's debt. Even if you look at the most rosy economic forecasts for growth, which, by the way, keep in mind, the United States last quarter had negative growth. We did not grow in the last quarter. We lost
First time
growth
since COVID.
First time since COVID, because of Donald Trump's sort of chaotic handling of trade and the economy and his disastrous policies. But even if you take those rosy forecasts that they're providing, you add a minimum of $2 trillion to the debt from this budget. So
my ears perked up when you said that you were hearing rumors about how they're going to do this, because you're on the committee. Yeah. So take us into how this works, like just the nuts and bolts of, you are on the budget committee, but in the minority party. What is the information flow like? How do these, we hear like conversations are happening. How are they happening? Who's in the room?
Yeah. So, and we'll take a step back. The budget committee, for our part, has now voted on the reconciliation package. So part of when I talk about the rumors I'm hearing is because now it is actually going out to the appropriations process, to the committees and subcommittees that actually draft those bills. So when I say I'm hearing rumors, I'm not on Energy and Commerce. Energy and Commerce will actually put those numbers into the parameters that were in the budget bill. And I know we're getting hyper technical now,
everybody knows they're supposed to do those bills, and they very rarely do. Are they actually going to get the 12 bills? When was the last time we got all 12 bills?
It's been a while, even under Democratic leadership, right? It's been a while since we got 12 bills. But now they have a reconciliation process. If they want to use reconciliation, they have to follow it. And that's the thing. It is filibuster proof, but it locks them in to a certain extent. So will they get this done? Will they get it done by September 30th or by the end of the year? Keep in mind that there's sort of two deadlines, right? September 30th is the end of the fiscal year for the federal government. But the Trump tax cuts do not expire until the end of the year. so that they could do a continuing resolution September 30th, kind of keep the government open and still work on this big budget and tax package.
Does that seem like a likely scenario to you?
I don't know yet, and I don't know yet because let's see. Donald Trump sort of got the House to elect Mike Johnson on the first speaker vote. He got through the budget and the reconciliation votes through a House, again, like through a lot of people who've said they would never vote for bills that would add this kind of debt. And now they've done it. This is the hard part, right? The academics, the theory is now out of the window. The numbers have to be plugged into the sheet where people can see them. And the rumors can swirl, and how we're finding things out, how we work with our colleagues, that'll go on, but the numbers have to ultimately be put on a piece of paper that people vote on, that's available to everyone to then go through. That's going to be the tricky part for them, because they're going to have to face these Medicaid cuts. They're going to have to face these cuts to basic needs and services, and their tax plan. They've showed us what it is.
Yeah.
A massive tax break. 83% of rich goes to the richest 1% of Americans. We know that's where they are. Are they going to be able to do that? And so, yeah, it's interesting. You asked about rumors, though. I'll tell you, like, one of the best spots to get information still is the House gym in the morning. That is where you go. And I mean, members of Congress still get along. We're all leaving our families. We're all coming up here. We're a lot of us are up here because we really want to do the right thing for the right reasons. You get a lot of information. You still talk a lot. But then, I've never seen anybody have as much control over their political party as Donald Trump does right now.
Well, what I'm concerned about is all these rules they're passing so that they just keep making it harder and harder and harder. I was reading this morning that they passed a rule that you couldn't, I don't even remember. It was just like one more layer of, you couldn't stop anything he does. You couldn't force a vote. You can't do this. You can't do that. They're just like removing their own power in a way I find really concerning.
It's concerning. It's pathetic. I mean, I'm a legislator, and regardless of who the president is, I want to preserve the power of the United States Congress. I mean, I love being in the state Senate. I love being in Congress. I love being a legislator. And I think that there's a reason Congress is in Article 1, not the presidency. We're the first thing that was thought of in the radical form of government that America represented when we were founded, which is to be a government that gets its power from the people, the consent of the governed. A government of, by, and for the people starts in that legislative branch with representative democracy. It's why we have the power to declare war. It's why we have the powers of the purse. It's why we have the power to have law and policy. And you are watching these Republicans line up like lemmings to walk off the cliff and give that power away to a guy like Donald Trump, who has showed he wants that power for himself, his friends, not for us, and to use it in a corrupt and destructive way for the American people.
That seems like a good transition to tariffs. I am really interested in hearing your worldview about tariffs, because a lot of Democrats have said, there are instances where it's a good tool. This is not a good tool. I was just listening to Rahm Emanuel talk on Gavin Newsom's podcast about tariffs. I thought he had a more coherent worldview about tariffs than I've heard from a lot of people. So I'm wondering where you are. How do you think about them in a vacuum? And then we can talk about the president's chaotic use of them specifically.
Yeah, so how I think about tariffs in a vacuum is that tariffs are neither good nor bad. Tariffs are a tool. And so a hammer is neither good nor bad. It's a tool. And it's a good tool for putting a nail in a wall. It's a bad tool for trying to fix your iPhone. It's a non-existent tool if you just leave it in the drawer. It doesn't do anything. And the point is, how you use a tool matters. You can use it to build things. You can use it to be constructive, or you can use it inappropriately in a way that is really destructive. And I think that Donald Trump's use of tariffs, his lack of cohesive strategy, his lack of any strategy at all, the way he uses them to try and be punitive, the way he doesn't think them through, the way he says they're tariffs, now they're not. Yes, there are. No, they're not. Yes, there are. The uncertainty that he's created in this environment, we've seen the results. It is, I mean, the Dow Jones had the worst 100 days of first 100 days of a presidency since 1932. But keep in mind what was going on in 1932. This is all Donald Trump's self-made error.
No,
He's
it's
the one who did
Biden's.
this.
You didn't hear? It's Biden's economy still. Don't worry.
Right. The economy that had been growing quarter over quarter. And then all of a sudden something happened on January 20th. What was that? Oh, it was Donald Trump. And, let me lodge a few other things about Donald Trump. Donald Trump always wants people to forget that he was president for 4 years. He talks about this as if he was never president and doesn't have any responsibility for what's happened in the last 8 years. And then he stood there on Inauguration Day, acting like he had never been president before and saying the golden age in America starts today. And then for the next 100 days, tanks the economy worse than any other president has done in modern history. That's what he needs to be held accountable for. And I'll tell you what, regardless of what he says, the American people are seeing what's happening. This is showing up in town halls. It's showing up in the carpool line for my kids. It is showing up on the street. It is showing up in polling. It is showing up at the ballot box. Look at Wisconsin in the Supreme Court race where Elon Musk put $25 million into that. And every single county in Wisconsin trended to the left from the 2024 presidential results.
But why isn't it showing up with Republicans in Congress? You'd think they'd be spooked. But man, even in the gym, are they spooked in the gym? Even in the gym?
They're scared. And I think, there's a few structural things that I think we should look at when we talk about running for office right now. One is the Citizens United decision, which is a disastrous Supreme Court decision. The second, of course, is how gerrymandered so many districts are right now. And on both sides, right? On both sides, there are gerrymandered congressional districts. And so what these Republicans see is they see districts where Donald Trump is getting, 65, 70, 75% of the vote like he did in some congressional districts in Kentucky. And they're going, okay, you know what? I just have to win my primary. And Donald Trump has such a control over the Republican primary. I mean, keep that. This is a guy who was twice impeached, who was convicted of 34 felonies for paying hush money to a porn star because he was having an affair while his wife was home with their infant son. He is someone who has belittled nearly everybody. He's degraded everybody. He doesn't have a good record from his first presidency. And he dominated the Republican primary in 2024 after all of that happened. They know who he is. And so the Republican members of Congress, I think, are really scared of having Donald Trump weigh in their primary. And then, of course, having Elon Musk, the world's richest man, weigh into their primaries as well. And that's where I say, look, we work for the American people. We work for the people who live in our districts. We have to work for our local communities, not for Donald Trump and quite honestly, his selfish, destructive agenda.
Agreed about all of that. I'm having a hard time personally figuring out how to respond differently than I did during the first Trump presidency, because I felt all those things then. These Republicans are afraid of him. He's super politically powerful. He tweets about them, and it seems like a bomb has gone off in their lives. I'm sympathetic to all of that. How do you think that the threat of losing, which seems to be what this is all about, becomes real enough to Republican legislators that they start to exercise some of the power that they seem to want so much that they couldn't possibly give it up? I mean, I struggle with what people want to be in Congress for, because if you don't get to make any decisions, it seems like a real bad job to me. But I also look around and think, isn't there a self-interested case for Republicans to rein some of this in?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. And even look back at the first Trump presidency. Say what you want to about Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. And believe me, I've said plenty. they did not cede legislative independence to Donald Trump in the way that we're seeing them cede
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And I think there may be two big things that have happened since then. First of all, Donald Trump's grip on the Republican Party has only grown since
Yeah.
2016. Remember that, like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene actually didn't serve during the first Trump presidency. They were elected in 2020. And,
Yeah.
and so, barely overlapped with a Trump presidency. There are more people now elected from the Republican Party who also look like Donald Trump
Yeah.
than there were during the first Trump presidency. And then I do think the ones who are still here, who again, it's not that I agree with them on, necessarily how we should handle assault weapons or the marginal tax rate or, things like that. But I think who really do believe in the American system of government and American democracy and a working government that is controlled by the people of this country. Where are they?
Mm.
When are they going to stand up? And the analogy I use is the one of the boiling frog. And I told that to one of my colleagues here from California, and I said, it's like when you put a frog in a pot of water and then you turn up the heat. The frog doesn't know that it's boiling until it's too late. And he just looked at me and goes, never heard that one before, but I think I know what you're getting at. And so,
You can also
maybe
do a
that's a
lobby
Kentucky.
turn. I think
Never heard that one
that's crazy.
Maybe it's a Kentucky thing. Maybe it's a Kentucky thing. But but I think that's where some of the members are too on their side, right? Is the analogy of the boiling frog. Is I think if you ask them in their heart of hearts, they truly believe I'm going to stand up when it matters. And what my question immediately back is, when do you think that is?
Yeah.
Is it from taking power from Congress that the Constitution doesn't allow for? Is it taking away people's rights? Is it tanking the economy? Is it defying the Supreme Court? Is it, being involved on January 6th and encouraging people to come violently overthrow a valid election? What is, when do you think that moment occurs that you should stand up to him? And I think even when you look back at what happened on January 6th, and one of the interesting things I've encountered while being here is talking to the Capitol Police officers who were here that day. Talked to lots of the members who were here that day, obviously too, are still traumatized by it, but talking to the Capitol Police officers and getting their reactions to it. They know what happened here that day.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that last night. I was thinking about how, 3 a.m. wake up mad at Donald Trump kind of situation. And I was thinking about how outrageous it is that he trumps up the crime angles on these deportations after he pardoned violent criminals from January 6th,
most violent
who some have already recommitted crimes, have been arrested again for stuff. Like, it's just completely outrageous. But I have a more like electoral question for you, because there is a part of me as a Democrat that realizes there's a strength in the Republican side that they've had so much turnover, that they have so many new responsive members that have come up in a new political moment and a new media environment. And do you think I think there's hunger for that on the Democratic side. Are you feeling that there's time for some turnover and some generational change?
Yeah, look, big time. We're seeing it. We're seeing it. My class in Congress was significantly younger. We're seeing a lot more younger people run for office on our side, and we're seeing the need to lead and take charge a little bit in terms of talking about this new media environment. I was a journalism major in college. I really value the role of the press and the fourth estate, not just in our daily lives, but particularly in government, of providing that transparency, accountability that we all need in government. But the legacy media is just not what it was. The reality is
so many people out there doing cable hits. Spread the word. Save your time.
Right? Save your time. Come on, do more forms of media. I mean, if you look at it, a couple of weeks ago, MSNBC's nightly numbers were around 600,000 viewers. Fox News's nightly numbers were around 3 million. There's, Elon Musk has 220 million followers on Twitter. There's a Republican influencer who, honest to God, their name is Cat Turd, who has over 3 million followers on on Twitter, that's who people are going to listen to. And the Republican numbers have an advantage right now on platforms such as X and Facebook and Instagram in particular. And I think that's in part because it's not just people talk about the Democrats and the Republicans. I think part of this goes into that Republicans for a long time have hated the media. And so I think we're faster to adopt the newer communication channels by being faster to adopt that, by giving people a platform where they were giving them content. What they saw soon is that the legacy media was covering what they were doing on social media.
Yeah.
And I think that the Democratic side was slower to adopt
You
that.
get the best of
I
both
remember-
worlds. You get to say what you want the way you want to on social media and then get coverage for it.
I remember, so I was in the state Senate in 2021, and I knew I wanted to get us on TikTok. Not a lot of politicians were on TikTok yet.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And yeah, and I hired a summer intern who had never worked in politics but had social media experience. And I said, you can't fail, but let's try this out. Let's try something different. And the reaction, we had local reporters and others initially making fun of us. And then we had over 100,000 viewers or followers within just a couple of months, and had videos that were routinely getting hundreds of thousands of views or millions of views on a TikTok account, which was a reach that the Kentucky State Senate Democrats just simply didn't have without it. And I think we're seeing more members now say, okay, the rules have changed.
Yeah.
The rules of the game have changed, and we have to be more intentional about how we're getting our message to everyone across all platforms.
I don't want to get too bogged down in the David Hogg DNC fight, except to note it as an illustration of one of many things it seems like the party is trying to work out for itself post-election. What do you think is one of the most meaningful struggles in the Democratic Party right now as we're kind of trying to find new leadership and a new way forward?
Yeah, look, I think it's really hard when you lose elections like we lost in 2024. We got our clocks cleaned. But it also is a good opportunity to do some looking in the mirror, to do some self-evaluation. And I think that that's good. I mean, you are seeing, even with a guy like David Hogg, you're seeing newer leaders step into positions of power to get their voices out there. And look, as it comes to the party stuff, it's been pretty simple to me. I don't think primaries are a bad thing. And I think that when you take a leadership role in the party, like to the extent the Democrats have the party, right?
Yeah.
If you take one of those leadership roles, your job is to bring Democrats together after the primaries and win elections. That's really hard to do if you are in one of those leadership positions and also actively playing in primaries. I think there's still even some distrust that lingers after the 2016 elections from people feeling like party leaders were putting their thumb on the primary scale. So primaries aren't a bad thing. To the extent we have a working party structure, that has to be there after the primaries. It's a lot harder to do and have that trust if you have people playing in those primaries. But you know what? Getting younger voices, getting newer voices, continue to get people engaged, making sure that we are putting forward a good, simple message that we're willing to repeat. I mean, I think one of the problems we've seen with Democrats all the time is that Republicans are governing in headlines. We've been governing in fine print. We've got to make sure that we are getting our message out there in a way that people understand it. So not just me sitting and talking about reconciliation for 5 minutes, that's not going to move anybody, but talking about what the budget does, how it hurts people, how it takes healthcare away from kids, how it takes food off of veterans' plates, making sure that people know these things that we're talking about, being willing to repeat it. And I think sometimes Democrats always want to talk about whatever is going on and, making sure that we're talking about the core message of what they're trying to do. And then to also recognize that, look, this is a different moment in time right now.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, just look back in time. The Republican nominees for president were Bob Dole, George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Right? That is a very different thing. And the rules have changed. Democrats don't have to be nice. about what Donald Trump is doing to our country and to our people, right? What he's doing to us. We don't have to be nice about that. And we can be direct and we can be honest and we can make sure that people know that with a guy like Donald Trump and what he is doing, sometimes you got to know when to fight fire with water. Sometimes you got to know when to fight fire with fire. And Donald Trump only understands fighting fire with fire.
Well, speaking of that process, you skipped over that part of my question in the beginning with the budget and the spending, with government funding. Like, do you see a fight? Do you see a government shutdown? Do you see because after last time, I mean, I don't know when the next deadline is, but it feels highly likely to me that at least the Democratic base is going to push for a shutdown.
Yes. Keep in mind, the Democrats voted against the continuing resolution of the budget and then the reconciliation. Those were two separate bills. But the Democrats in the House, with the exception of one, all voted against it.
Yeah.
The reality is, in the House, we're so much different than the Senate. In the Senate, one person can stand on the floor for 25 hours and shut the thing down for 25 hours. In the House, we really are a majority-based body. We need 3 Republicans who are willing to stand up and say what Donald Trump is doing is chaotic, crazy, and wrong. And we're actually going to provide some rationality and common sense to what's going on. They have not done that. And that's why, I think I didn't mean to gloss over it, but I think in what even we've been saying about the power he holds over their party right now, that is showing up in these votes. The Democrats all voted against the reconciliation bill. So, when you say the Democratic base wants this, I mean, the Democrats are voting against these terrible budget bills. That the continuing resolution that is through September 30th, that meant we don't have a budget for this year.
Yeah.
So representative democracy, which is our community sending us to Washington to advocate for them, to say, you know what, when you're talking about spending federal money in Louisville, Kentucky or Paducah, Kentucky, maybe you should consult somebody from there. Maybe the people of Louisville should have a voice in that process. By doing this continuing resolution, there's no community project funding. There's no input from the people of Louisville into crafting a new budget that meets our needs now. It's just a continuing resolution of last year's budget that has no new projects, that has no new, it doesn't help the people of Louisville. They gave that up. The Republicans gave that up. And it's going to hurt people in the process. So does the government get funded? If Donald Trump tells them not to shut the government down today, he's 3-0.
Yeah.
And what we need is 3 Republicans to stand with the Democrats to say this budget is cruel. It hurts people, hurts our seniors, our kids, our veterans. It hurts the future growth of our country. It hurts us with our allies. It makes us less safe. It makes us less prosperous. We need people who are willing to stand up and say those things. And then, because, in the House, at least, particularly in the House, even with a narrow majority, if you have 218 votes, you can pass something. If you don't have 218 votes, you can't pass something. And so, I think the Democrats have been unified and strong on those key points. We need some Republicans who are willing to also exercise their legislative independence and say, we're going to stand up for a budget that helps the American people too.
So as we think about being responsive to voters and fighting fire with fire, I'm in Representative Massey's district. I live in Union. Yeah. And we consistently send him back, which I interpret in some ways as our community being responsive to his argument that we spend too much money. And even if it seems cruel, we're spending too much money and we've got to do something about it. And that does seem to be a prevalent sentiment. I mean, the public had more tolerance for DOGE, especially at the beginning, than you might have thought. I think that many people are saying, now, not like that. And I think that's often what's going to happen with the budget. Not like that. That's not what I meant. But how do you think about talking to people who sincerely are worried about the debt and the deficit, or sincerely believe that their taxes are too high?
Yeah, I'm sincerely worried about the debt. I actually come out of state legislatures where we balanced budgets. We had to balance budgets. I would like to see us balance budgets in Washington. And, I don't think that's a radical notion, but we have to talk honestly about what we're doing, right? And who's getting helped and who's getting hurt in the process. I mean, they are getting ready to do the largest tax break in American history for the billionaire class. That is going to add trillions of dollars to the country's debt. And on that point, Massey and I agree. You can see what he said about this planned budget with these planned tax cuts. Now, you can rest assured that Thomas Massey and I would write drastically different budgets if either one of us had the pen. But we agree on what this current budget proposal is. It is a massive tax giveaway to the richest Americans at the expense of everyone else that adds trillions of dollars to the nation's debt. And so that is how I think you can talk about it. And then, look, again, I worry about efficiency in government. I want to make sure we are being efficient, that we're helping people out. So like I'm on the Veterans Committee. We've got to do better by our veterans. We made our veterans, the men and women who are willing to put on a uniform and quite literally sacrifice everything for us and our freedom. We made them a promise, both a legal and a moral promise, that after your service, we will take care of you. We will make sure you have health care. We'll even try to make sure that you have training, that you can get a job, that your service to our country is not forgotten. We're not doing enough by our veterans right now. The time
What's
they
the
have to wait.
conversation in your committee about the massive cuts at
To the
the
VA.
VA?
Yeah. And so when they talk about these massive cuts at the VA, we need to do better by our veterans. Cutting 70,000 VA workers through DOGE isn't the way to do it. And I hear from Republicans all the time, let's run government like a business. Fine, then run government like a business. No business would ever do a reduction in force the way you guys did this.
No.
By going in and just saying, if you've worked here in this department less than 2 years, you're fired. How many future CEOs, how many future secretaries did they get rid of in that purge? They went through and maybe got rid of some of their most talented and promising people who are there to help our veterans.
Some they probably recruited.
I mean, I talked to a guy in Louisville and talked about him on the floor. This is a guy who served in the military in 2 different branches. When he got out of the military, decided he would go to HUD and work at HUD in trying to help veterans find housing. This is the guy who got laid off. I'm sorry. I think in America that the word homeless veteran, the 2 words homeless veteran, should never, ever be put together. Firing the person who's helping find housing for veterans is not a way to help that problem out.
And so what can your committee do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Veterans Committee, there is still bipartisanship on the Veterans Committee. I do think the Veterans Committee understands its mission, right? Our mission is to take care of veterans. Now, there are still fights, there are still disagreements on how to do that. But even some of the hot button issues we talk about a little differently. We have to. If you have, what's the fastest growing population in veterans right now? Women. And this is not something that existed 50 years ago. We didn't have tons of women veterans after the Vietnam War. We've got a lot of women veterans after the 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so what happens when you have a woman who served her country, who has an ectopic pregnancy and is in a state where they don't offer abortion? So normally you're talking about abortion, which is like the granddaddy of political issues. But on the Veterans Committee, we have to also say, how do we get this woman veteran who served our country the health care she needs?
Yeah.
And how are we making sure that we have all the healthcare services available to women, from mammograms to pap smears? How are we making sure we're taking care of all of these needs? And so, we talk about these issues, I think, a little differently on the Veterans Committee, and there's concern, right? Now, there's not the type of concern where people are standing up and railing on the Trump administration yet. I mean, I think this goes back to what we were talking about and the fear that exists in the Republicans of publicly rebuking him. But then there's also times when we're going, okay, like we had a hearing not long ago where we had some agencies there who are trying to help veterans navigate their benefits claims, that they have claims for benefits. And look, when we have these companies who are coming in, they're not being accredited, they're not registering, they're making tons of money off helping veterans navigate their claims to get the benefits that they should already have. I mean, and you saw people coming together, and this is like, you saw Nancy Mace after I was asking questions of this company saying, tell me why you're not accredited. Tell me why you haven't gone through this process. Tell me why you're not. Tell me how much you're doing for our veterans. She just said, answer me yes or no. Did you make more or less than $100 million last year? He wouldn't answer the question, right? So like these companies who are coming in that might be preying on our veterans, how do we combat that? Then the flip side, we look at that and go, okay, if veterans are so desperate that they're turning to unaccredited companies to get their benefits claims already, what we need to be focused on is making it easier for veterans themselves to get their benefits claims. That's not going to happen by cutting 70,000 people from the VA. And so, it's like we do a little better on bipartisanship in the Veterans Committee, but we still need people to stand up and say, okay, Trump administration, you talk about this. What are you really doing to help our veterans right now? How are these cuts to SNAP going to impact our veterans? A lot of veterans in Kentucky right now, they use Medicaid to make sure they're getting treatment for things like even PTSD. How do we protect that? And where are you going to be on that? So it's like I said, we're getting to the point where they're going to put the numbers behind this budget. We're going to see where they really are.
We like to move on from these tougher policy conversations and have a little exhale at the end of our episodes. So we wanted to talk to you about something that I'm obsessed about with your family.
Okay.
Which is the photography.
Oh my gosh.
You guys,
you're the first person who's asked me this question since I've been in Congress.
What? I'm obsessed with it. Okay. So you guys, this is what happened with the congressman's family. This was your older brother, right? When your older brother was born?
It's my older brother. It's my older brother.
When his older brother was born, a photographer named Pam Spalding came from the Louisville Courier-Journal, and originally planned to just like do this year after the birth. Because was he a New Year's baby?
Yeah, born on New Year's Day.
Amazing.
Wow, it's incredible.
Listen, I'm obsessed with it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. Okay, so then she comes and then she just stays. And when I say stays, does she still come and take pictures of y'all sometimes?
Yeah, she does.
You guys, how old is your older brother?
He is 48.
So there's a book. Yeah. The book. When did the book come out?
Came out in like 2008-ish, 2009. So the first 30 years. The
first 30 years. It is this is a fun story. Josie Raymond gave it to me because I talked about how cool I thought this was. And she's like, there's a book. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I'll send it to you. She stayed at my house for an Emerge gathering. And then she sent me the book as a thank you present. So I have the book. And it's deeply nostalgic for me because we're very similar in ages. So just watching these pictures, like just the toys and the way your house was decorated and like, it's just so, but I mean, I cannot express what I would give to have, like your parents. Oh my God, what I wouldn't give to have like basically your entire family life, every milestone, every moment photographed by this incredible photographer.
Yeah, it's truly bizarre. Let's just get rid of the elephant in the room.
It's crazy.
It's truly bizarre. Yeah. It's truly bizarre. In fact, so my wife and I, when we were dating, I just remember one time. It's like, you're dating somebody, you remember certain moments, and she just said, "Tell me something about you I don't know." And I was like, "There's this woman that follows my family around taking pictures."
And has for several decades.
And she's like, "What? I'm sorry." Yeah, and so it's a wild story. And I'll give you like a little bit of the background on it as I understand it, because I was born into it. So it's like it's like nothing ever happened, right? It's the only existence I know. But there was the Louisville Courier Journal used to be one of the best papers in the country. It was owned by the Bingham family, and they were a talent pipeline. They kept a lot of talent here. They paid people well. They valued journalism. So they had a young photographer at the time, Pam Spalding, who birth photos were the rage in the 70s. So people were taking pictures of giving birth, and she had her own child who's about a year older than my brother. And she said,
Okay.
you know what? Everyone's taking pictures of a birth. Women have been giving birth since beginning of time, right? What really alters things is when you bring that baby home from the hospital. So she had this idea that I want to do a year-long photo essay on a family that's having their firstborn child. And so she went to Lamaze instructors at the time, like, there's not an internet. This is 1976. And so she gets turned down, and she gets turned down repeatedly. And so she calls my parents and tells them, I only want to do it for a month. So she shortened it. And my dad worked his way through college and law school at UK by being a television reporter on WKYT in Lexington, Kentucky. And my dad, this is like, if you knew my dad, this would be even more surprising, because my dad is like the nicest guy, but does not have a high EQ, right? That he's a very, like, my mom and my dad, I forget whether it's the right brain or right brain or left brain, which one's, but my mom is all the emotion and my dad's all the analysis, right? And like they come together and make this great, cute couple. And so my dad's like, for all the times I've asked people to do a story on them and their lives,
Oh, that's nice.
I can't say no the first time someone asks me. And so my brother was born New Year's Day, 1977. She followed them out of the hospital and said she was going to do it for a month. After a year, they did a story in the Courier at the time on my brother. And then she just kept coming back. And about 5 years into it, she'd been doing it. I've been born at that point. My sister hasn't been born at that point. And she was talking to one of her mentors who's at National Geographic. And he said, no one has ever done a long-term documentary of a family. You should keep doing this. And so when I say this, I think part of the reason it worked, Pam's awesome. I now realize how okay my parents had to be with that, which is probably pretty vulnerable.
Listen, they would have she could have asked me for the year and I would have said yes immediately. I've done this myself, like a little week in the life project, and they're my favorite pictures I've ever taken, but I can't do it all the time every day.
She does it all that. But what's interesting for us, we never saw the pictures.
Oh, I forgot
so
about
we
that
never
part.
saw them. And so people are like, how did you think about this? And it's like, this woman came around who was taking pictures. We never saw them. She has this remarkable ability to blend in and not be noticed. It really is. She makes it about what she's taking pictures of, not herself. I mean, she really just like blends in.
I remember Sarah telling me she came to her like 21st birthday party. It was like out drinking with her and her friends.
She was there when I got engaged. My wife had no clue, right? I'm like, if I point her out, like, and it's so the book comes out after 30 years, and there's a book editor, and he sat down with each of us individually, and he showed us the pictures in the book to get our reaction.
Oh,
it was the first time I'd ever seen them. I'm no kidding. I had seen 2 pictures in the book before it was published. It was the first time I'd ever seen them. And one of the pictures, like, he flips the page, and it was the most bizarre experience I've ever had, because you're watching your life that you've totally forgotten. Right? Like, you've totally forgotten.
God.
And so she's like flipping the pages. And like, there's one page, I started bawling. I started crying. And I'd forgotten she was there. She was in the balcony of the church. But it's one of my brothers and our mutual best friends died when he was 20 of a rock climbing accident. Just super guy. And we were the pallbearers in his funeral. And I'm like 18 and Dave's like 21. And the pictures of us and our friends carrying the casket down the aisle, and this guy got me now. And like, you don't think about that. And she just turned the page, and like, I couldn't even speak. You're just like, oh my God, all those things that come back, for all of us who've lost a childhood friend, and like, you just don't even know she's there. And so it's these amazing images. But we never saw them. And so it's this like,
Do you see
So
him
she
now?
stayed
Now that
around.
the book's
Yeah.
out?
No, we don't see him now. She comes around. We don't
Oh
see
my
him. My
gosh.
kids know who she is. And she just like sometimes she'll come to big events and then sometimes she'll just like, hey, what are you guys doing today? Or sometimes
Ah,
Yeah,
she
I wanted to
tries like
ask you, like, what's the coordination here? Like, is she
we're
just on every
terrible at it.
invitation list, or like, what happens?
No, I think she's probably frustrated with us right now because we're really bad about we never reach out to her. I mean, my wife works full time. I've got a pretty busy job myself. We have 3 kids. It's a lot, but like sometimes she'll want to know things are happening. And like example, like before I got this job, my wife was the one who traveled a lot. And so she'd be like, let me know when Chris is out of town, and she would come over and she'd be like, I think she wanted to photograph just like because when she started this project in the late 70s, there probably weren't a lot of men who were staying home while their wives were
Yeah.
traveling for work. Right. And like what that looks like in the difference of a generation. And the one thing we heard her explain was, I said, looking through the pictures is really bizarre. The second most bizarre thing was we all came up here to DC to National Geographic. I guess it was like maybe '09. And she presented not just the pictures of us, but like her vision for it and what she was doing. And like we're all sitting there like, we felt like subjects. Like we felt like we were, like we were in the
you
zoo.
are. But you are.
We're in this. And she's talking about, and she said one of the things that inspired her is she showed a picture of a whole bunch of really old cars. And like, I don't know all the types of cars, but it was like the Model T cars, right? They looked like really old timey cars and they were parked in a park in Louisville. And it looked so beautiful because they're these beautiful old cars. And she's like, what I realized about this picture is that if anybody had seen it the day it was taken, they would have said, oh, there's a bunch of cars in a parking lot.
Oh, that's
And what
why
she
she
really
doesn't
wants to show is not for us today. It's for somebody 100 years from now to go, that's how they ate food, right?
Oh,
That's a
wow.
McDonald's, right? Like wait, they had a birthday party at McDonald's. What's McDonald's? Or that's what a McDonald's looked like, and it's like what you said about the toys. It's the metadata on top of
Yeah.
everything else. And even now, if you think back to it, like when I was a kid, um, we had landlines, with phones. When my kids come to Washington, one of their favorite things to do is go in the cloakroom because there's still the phone booths that have a phone, and they're like, okay, can we make a call? Can we make a call? I'm like, yeah, you can. By the
Well, and
way,
it's
we
like
carry
that's what
phones
I
around with us
love the
everywhere
most.
now, but you can have a phone. Yes.
That's what I tell people I love the most about old movies. Like Home Alone is my favorite movie because
Yeah.
I'm his age. And so watching, but the movie houses are not real houses. Like they're
No.
still highly
No.
designed. They're not capturing what it was really like to be a kid and what your kitchen looked like in 1987, And so like to see those, I think that exactly right, that metadata,
Yeah.
that like background is just, I find it, I love it so much. I think it's so important. And that's what's fun for either like old family photos. Like it's obviously amazing to see your family members, but like you're like, where's that couch? Where'd happen to that couch? That couch is white.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
where'd that go?
What was going on? Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, so yeah, but we still don't see the pictures. She
That's
still comes
crazy.
around, and in less than 2 years, it'll be 50 years that she's done
Oh
it.
my gosh.
That's amazing.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Is she
And
gonna put out another
as
book?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And I've seen, a publisher would have to get a hold of it, and she'd have to do it.
Oh,
And
50
back
years.
to Pam. Obviously, I've been around her my entire life in all sorts of situations, from weddings to funerals to hospitals to birthdays to Christmas to just hanging out in the kitchen. She is so much about the work
Mm.
that I think Pam is going to be famous after she's dead. Right? Like,
Wow.
I don't think she wants. And also, by the way, the pictures are not left to us. They're left to a historical society. And so like we don't even get the pictures. I'm sure someone will probably let us make a copy of a film if there's anything we like, but like
I
we don't
mean,
even
come
we
on.
don't even get the pictures. Yeah, so there's I mean at this point, I hate to like use numbers, but I'm guessing millions of images.
Right.
Right? Millions of images. And who knows?
Years.
Who knows what they show?
I feel like if I were you, I'd be calling Pam all the time to be like, I've got this bill in front of me. What do you think about this, Pam? Because, I mean, to have that kind of vision and perspective to see the world in such a unique way, like what a valuable person to have in your life. That's incredible.
Yeah.
She's so great. I mean, like, the Courier got that talent in, and she did a Neiman Fellowship at Harvard. I mean, she's a talented, accomplished photographer all in her own right. So yeah, well, National Geographic, I hope they do. In some ways, like the first 30 years of our lives were wonderfully boring. And I said, like, my parents are still married, and like they're not just married, they still hold hands. I mean, they're a super cute couple that's been married for over 50 years.
But can we talk about the wild happenstance and fate that she picked a family where one person turned out to be a congressman? Like, that's kind of wild.
Again, I'm just saying Pam's instincts.
Must be good. You weren't even born yet.
Can I have Pam's number and just consult with her sometimes? I feel like Pam understands some things about the world.
It's so weird. I mean, like, 'cause she didn't even know my parents, right? And I think, like, it's interesting, like, when you look at the three kids, my sister's a teacher, my brother's active duty military. I've served in my capacity in government. We did all gravitate towards service.
Yeah.
We did all gravitate towards careers, and that's probably a lot of our upbringing. But she did. And like I said, I'm not the project. My brother's the project, which is also just
I was an intern with your sister for Congressman Ben Chandler, and I still remember her telling me about this and being like, "Hold up, what?" Haven't stopped thinking about it since 2003, whenever we interned.
For me, I didn't think anything of it until the book came out. And then when that book came out, you're kind of like, oh. Whoa. But then after that, like, we had super preemie twins. There's been some interesting, just life things. We lost all our grandparents. Like, they, all my grandparents, except for one, was alive when the book came out, which is also
in the
weird.
Book. It's very sweet.
Yeah. So
with you and your little 80s pumpkin haircuts. They're so cute.
That my mom did, right? That was so funny. So funny.
I love it so much. I love it so much. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, first of all, just thank you to your family, because I do think this is an important historic project that you guys have made an enormous sacrifice to be a part of. So thanks for that, because I enjoy the book.
Yeah.
And thank you, obviously, for your service in Congress. Thank you for coming on our show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you guys for what you're doing, and hope to come back.
Thank you to Representative McGarvey. Please don't forget to check out our Mother's Day gift guide and to share your Pantsuit Politics birthday messages. Links for both are in our show notes. We'll be back in your ears on Tuesday with another episode. And until then, have the best weekend available to you. Pantsuit Politics is produced by Studio D Podcast Production.
Elise Knapp is our managing director. Maggie Penton is our director of community engagement.
Xander Singh is the composer of our theme music with inspiration from original work by Dante Lima.
Our show is listener supported. Special thanks to our executive producers:
Stephanie Elms,
Sasha Egolf,
the Villanueva family,
the Bookshelf on Church in Kilmarnock, Virginia,
Lindsay Sauer, Laura Martin,
Kristen Wendell,
Christina Werner,
Kristen Heidinger,
Kimberly Ludwig,
Julie Huff,
Jill Biziano,
Jessica Borrow,
Jan Feltz,
Jackie Franklin Earp,
Heather Ericacy,
the Charney family,
Gabrielle McDonald and Wren,
Ellen Burns,
Connie Perchetti,
Christian Campbell,
Beth Loy,
Ashley Terry,
Anya Bensaka,
Amy and Derek Starr Redwine,
Carla Hagemeister,
Emily Ho,
Emily Grover Kopek,
Christy Johnson,
Sharice Winter,
Ashley Kennedy,
Mark and Rachel Redman.
The Dixon family,
Chelsea Garter, Christy Matthews, Ellen Scott and Karen Shoebottom, Jeff Davis, Kathleen Gallant, Michelle Wood, Nicole Berkles, Norma Starry, Paula Brimmer, Sarah Little, Vicki Jackman, Will and Jess